Hi, my name is Erin Barnhart. I'm a food stylist in New York City, and today I'm going to teach you some basics on food styling. So today we're working with a 9-layer chocolate cake. It's actually based off of a 10-layer cake that my grandmother made, but I ran out of batter, so we're going with 9 layers today. So one of my favorite flavor combinations is chocolate and cherries. I got an assortment of different cherries. I always like when we have different textures on top, so I thought it would be really nice to have an assortment including here candied cherries. These are some really beautiful Luxardo cherries, and then we actually have freeze-dried cherries. So it's just kind of a nice assortment of different colors and textures that I think visually look really interesting and appealing on top of a cake, just to make it more pleasant to look at. So to get started on our cake, I've kind of envisioned doing an asymmetrical kind of style. Obviously, the world is your oyster when it comes to how you're going to decorate your cake. I just kind of think it looks neat from a visual perspective to do something that's kind of off to the side. Kind of like, I always think of it as like a flower behind its ear kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and start decorating on this part, keeping the different colors and textures in mind. And then I'll probably cut a slice, and then I can show you how to garnish a slice so it kind of has a similar effect. I haven't really thought too much about this, but like I said, we just want to keep different colors and textures in mind. I sometimes get on Instagram for inspiration and look at different pastry chefs that I'm really into, or different accounts or something like that. So I think to start, I'm going to go with my Luxardo. I think it's helpful to think about the consistency of different items when you're layering. If I put this on top of other items, I will get, like drips on there, which sometimes we might like, but I think for this application, maybe not. So I'm gonna use my little offset. I just think it's helpful for times like this. You could obviously use your fingers. I know I've outlined all these tools, but I'm a big believer that your fingers are kind of your best tool. But we're just gonna kind of go around. Sometimes things kind of slip, but that's okay. Give it a little pat. And really, there's no rhyme or reason. I like food. It's so fun because it's not the end of the world if you mess it up, Bob Ross would tell you that there's always happy accidents when you mess up on your food, and it's not the end of the world, So we love Bob Ross. So in between my garnishes, I always like to keep a little bit of water. And I already showed you, but I have my handy little paper towels nearby. It's just kind of helpful. Keep things nice and clean. And I always have a little side towel. So there's some Luxardo, and then we're just gonna kind of keep layering. Build with things that you think are cool and what visually looks nice to you and what you feel comfortable working with. Things that are delicious, again, we keep going back to different colors and textures, I think is a good thing to kind of keep in mind, So when you're picking out how you want to layer your cake, we didn't talk about this before. This is one of my favorite cakes, but one of the reasons I really love it is a lot of cakes, like a nice type buttercream or a fondant or something, you get this really beautiful, nice smooth edge, which is really nice. But personally for this application, I kind of like this cake because it has this kind of more organic, textured side to it that I just think is visually interesting for people to see. So it's just personal preference. Going back to our concept of making things visually interesting, it's all about contrasting different things. So from a texture perspective, I was talking about the different textures between the cherries. So I thought it would look neat. We have these shiny, kind of sticky looking candied cherries that I think look really beautiful, like little gems. And then we have our freeze-dried cherries that have kind of a matte finish and kind of this, wrinkly texture almost that's kind of dry. And then the Luxardos look really beautiful because obviously they're like this really viscous, kind of syrupy, yummy, inviting looking cherry. So I feel like together they look just like a visually interesting kind of combination. And then tying that back in with the cake, I thought it looked really nice with the cake because it has this nice smooth glossy finish on top, and then kind of this more rough and rustic exterior around the edge. So I think together it's just kind of a visually interesting combination that I think ultimately we'll take a nice picture and hopefully be really delicious and something people really want to like take a bite of. So another cool thing to keep in mind is taking these tools that you'll have available at your toolkit and kind of manipulating the ingredients to do different stuff. So to add another layer of texture, I thought it might look kind of neat if we grate some of these dried cherries. Let's find a nice one, a nice round one. Just to kind of give it another little something, you know? We have some yummy syrup from the Luxardos happening. Now we have kind of a more rough texture happening in there. See, now we kind of just have another element. Use our microplane and just kind of get a little grating going on in there. All right, I'm just gonna put a few more in there. I think it's kind of nice to think about varying height too, you know? Like, I don't want this. But look, now we have some nice visual height right there. Okay, so let's cut a perfect slice of cake. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. It depends on the texture of your cake. Here I have a serrated knife, and I have, this is a santoku, but just a non-serrated blade. For kind of a more crumbly texture cake, you're definitely gonna wanna use a serrated. But for something, if you had like a nice chilled cake that's really dense and moist, you would use something like a non-serrated blade. Another thing that's really handy to have is a heat gun. And once you have it, it's one of those tools you'll use for a million different things. This one has 2 different settings, but they have all different styles. For this application, it's really handy because what you can do, particularly for an icing that's a bit harder or denser to get through, is use this to heat up your knife. I know sometimes, and then you can get like a nice clean cut through your cake. I know that sometimes people say you could use hot water, but you don't want to use hot water necessarily because then you're going to have a wet slice of cake and you can see it'll bleed out onto your icing. If you don't have a heat gun, you could take your knife and run it under very hot water and dry it very well, and that would also work. So the other thing you're gonna get ready is you get your station ready. I have my plate here, and like we talked about earlier, I have a little alcohol and I'm just gonna wipe my plate down. So I guess it might go without saying, but it's a good reminder to think about how there's a lot of things that you can't necessarily see with your eye, but the camera will see. So it's just nice to get in the habit of kind of wiping everything down with alcohol or vodka, and then you just have like this very nice clean plate. Okay, so let's get into this cake. One thing you also want to be mindful of is it's kind of, you probably have experienced this, but it's always disappointing when you don't make your cut right into the dead center of the cake to get your nice clean slice out. So you kind of just want to look at it from the top down and just be mindful of where your 2 cuts meet so that you get that nice clean slice. I think this cake is pretty soft and I don't need a heat gun, but I'm going to go ahead and use it just because I don't think it'll hurt. Just 30 seconds or so. It really is amazing what you can cut through. So I'm just gonna go right in the center, like that. Make sure you go all the way through. And then between each cut, might sound like common sense, but it's important just to wipe your knife with some warm water and go ahead and dry it off so that you can get that nice other clean cut. Give it a little turn and make sure you go all the way to the center. Like so, like that. All right, so now we have our slice. Sometimes I like to use 2 spatulas so we can just kind of lift out like that. And then you can just gently bring it down. And like we mentioned earlier, if you use 2 little offset spatulas, then you don't ever have fingerprints stuck in your beautiful cake that you've worked so hard to make look so good. So now we have our slice. And check it out. There's no cake board on there. It's nice and clean. We keep everything clean. Check this out. So if you want to have your big, beautiful cake in the background, I find it really helpful to have Q-tips on hand. So you can just go through and just kind of clean up any like smears and stuff. I kind of like these crumbs that are in there, so I'm gonna leave that for now. But you'll go through. And then, like I said, we always have our alcohol on hand. Give it a little drop. I'm just gonna go back and work through. See? And now you have this nice, beautiful place where your slice came out. We'll clean that up. And there's no cake board or anything like that showing. And let's go ahead and decorate a little slice. So I think it'll be kind of nice with my asymmetrical decorating, just to go back through and get some of these beautiful garnishes right there on the plate. I think these Luxardo cherries look really beautiful and inviting. You know, they're like so juicy and yummy looking. These guys. Then, okay, on second thought, these candied cherries look so beautiful. We're gonna go ahead and just put a couple up here because I think they look so vibrant and nice. And then maybe a part of a freeze-dried one just for a little texture. Look at that, the light. Ugh, these are so neat. If it was cherry season, it would be beautiful to do some fresh cherries, but we don't have those in New York right now. So another thing that's important to keep in mind when you're styling is there's a lot of things that look really good with your eyes that don't necessarily look good with a photo. So as I'm building this slice, I'm just kind of going back and forth and looking at, take the picture, and you want to be looking at what the lens sees, not necessarily what you see with your own eyes, because it'll look different, depending. Okay, I think it would be really nice if we could see the back of our slice. And I'm noticing that I got a beautiful slice with a gaping hole in the back. So I'm just gonna go back over with my little mini offset spatula, which we've established. It's one of the best tools you can have. And we'll just fill that little hole. Yeah. Okay, so I'm also noticing I want a different angle on my slice, but see how it's leaning? I have this beautiful, delicate cake and it's kind of sliding apart. I have a skewer. And I'm just gonna take that skewer. I'm gonna take my tweezers. Just like if you were building a cake like they teach you in pastry school. You know, you can put dowels down in there. I'm gonna take that skewer and stick it down in there. Look, straight as an arrow. Thank you so much for joining me on this food styling video series with CCAP. If you'd like to keep tabs on me, you can follow me at Hey Y'all, It's Erin on Instagram or at erinbarnhart.biz online. Here's to making more beautiful and delicious plates. Bon appetit.